Jai, so welcome everyone to this evening's class, which is episode 4 of the series that we're doing called The Glories of Lord Chaitanya in Navadvip and Jagannath Puri Dhams. And today we're going to be talking about the descent of the river Ganga or Ganges, or sometimes they say Mother Ganga. So I'm going to have a PowerPoint for this. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully. So let me do slideshow. Here we go. Okay, you can all see that fine? Yes, okay, great. Thank you, Liam, for the thumbs up on that one. All right, so yeah, in this class, we're going to talk about the river Ganga. I'm going to call it the Ganga because I lived in Mayapur for 9 years and everyone there calls it the Ganga. So yeah, although maybe you know it by the name Ganges, but I'll just say Ganga, it's the same thing. So in this class, we're going to talk about the source of the Ganga, why and how the Ganga descended to this world. And then we're going to look at the route that the Ganga takes through the whole universe, and then also through India, leading up to its flowing through Navadvip Dham and some interesting pastimes that happen there. We'll find out how the Ganga came to be called also as the Bhagirathi. It's another name for the Ganga, is Bhagirathi River. And it's also called the Jahnavi River. Like, you know, we have the song, the Gaura Arti song where it says, Jahnavi Tatavane Jagamana Loba. So that means that the Gaura Arti takes place on the bank of the Ganga in Navadvip. So that's Jahnavi. Tata means the bank of the Jahnavi, means the bank of the Ganga. So how did it come to be known as the Jahnavi River? And then we also look a little bit at the importance of the Ganga in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes and how we can all get the mercy of Mother Ganga. All right, so first of all, where does the Ganga come from? And most of you are familiar with, this pastime, that when Vamanadev came, then he begged 3 paces of land from Bali Maharaj, and Bali Maharaj said, okay. And with his first step, he covered the whole earth. With his second step, he covered the whole universe. And with his toe, he actually poked a hole in the universal shell. So beyond the universal shell, there's what's called the causal ocean. That's the ocean in which Mahavishnu lies down on Anantashesha, and he's relaxing there in the causal ocean. So, and from Mahavishnu comes all the universes out of the pores of his body. So each universe is like an egg shape covered by a shell, which consists of many layers of gross and subtle elements. And so Vamanadev, he extended his leg so far up that it poked through all of those layers and pierced a hole in the shell of the universe. And that causal ocean started coming through. So that's what it's saying here. Lord Vishnu, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, appeared as Vamanadev in the sacrificial arena of Bali Maharaj. Then he extended his left foot to the end of the universe and pierced a hole in its covering with the nail of his big toe. Through the hole, the pure water of the causal ocean entered this universe as the Ganges River. Having washed the lotus feet of the Lord, which are covered with reddish powder, the water of the Ganges acquired a very beautiful pink color. Every living being can immediately purify his mind of material contamination by touching the transcendental water of the Ganges, yet its waters remain ever pure. So this is the most well-known story of the origin of the Ganga, but Srimad Bhagavatam gives some further information on this. So here, this is from the 8th canto. When Lord Brahma, who was born of a lotus flower, saw the effulgence of his residence, Brahmaloka, had been reduced by the glaring effulgence from the toenails of Lord Vamanadev, he approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead. O king, the water from Lord Brahma's Kamandalu, his water pot, washed the lotus feet of Lord Vamanadev, who is known as Urukrama, the wonderful actor. Thus that water became so pure that it was transformed into the water of the Ganges, which went flowing down from the sky, purifying the three worlds like the pure fame of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So one version is that that water was, Vamanadev just poked a hole and then the causal ocean started flowing in. And then, but that also flowed over Lord Vamanadev's foot, so it became like Charanamrita. And now this alternative version is that Lord Brahma was pouring water from his personal water pot on bathing, doing like an abhishek on the feet of Lord Vamanadev, and then that became the Ganga. So we have these two slightly different versions of the story, both from the same authoritative source. They're both directly from the verses of the Bhagavatam. So then how do we reconcile this apparent difference? Then we have to consult the acharyas. So let's see here. This is from the purport. Srila Prabhupada addresses this exact thing. He writes, here we understand that the Ganges began when the water from Lord Brahma's Kamandalu washed the lotus feet of Lord Vamanadev. But in the 5th canto, it is stated that the Ganges began when Vamanadev's foot pierced the covering of the universe so that the transcendental water of the causal ocean leaked through. And elsewhere, so if that wasn't enough, there's another version. Elsewhere, it is stated that Lord Narayan appeared as the water of the Ganges. The water of the Ganges, therefore, so here's the conclusion, is a combination of 3 transcendental waters, and thus the Ganges is able to purify the 3 worlds. This is the description given by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So it's not one or the other, it's both. Or in fact, it's all 3. So the Ganges is very purifying. It's this water that bathed the feet from Lord Brahma's Kamandalu, it's the causal ocean, and it's Lord Narayan himself in liquid form. So, so we know that nothing happens just randomly, right? There is a Supreme Personality of Godhead who is controlling everything and is aware of everything. And that means that everything happens for a reason. So what is the reason for the Ganga's descent? We could say that, the reason could just be that Krishna wanted to bless all the souls in this universe by giving them a way that they can easily become purified. But usually speaking, and that's true, but generally speaking, when Krishna wants something to happen, he also creates an external circumstance in order to like precipitate the event, or to kind of like trigger something happening so that his internal desire can be fulfilled. So the trigger event that made the Ganga descend into this world is also narrated in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 9th canto. So let's look at that. Sorry that the picture is blurry. I couldn't find one with better resolution. So here what we have is the sons of Sagar getting burnt by, not exactly by Kapila. This picture is not totally correct according to the Bhagavatam. It's not that they're being burnt by the eyes or by the will of this person who is seated on the tree stump, who is Kapila Dev, but they're actually burnt by their own fire of their own anger towards him. So I'm going to tell you this story now. So long, long ago, there was a king who was named Sagar Maharaj, and he was performing a sacrifice at Ashvamedha Yajna, which is a horse sacrifice. And he had a nice horse that he was going to use for that. But then Lord Indra came. Lord Indra sometimes gets worried when powerful people perform horse sacrifices, because he's famous for performing the 100 horse sacrifice, and he wants to remain, like unmatched in that achievement. So he went and stole the horse that Sagar Maharaj was going to use. So Sagar Maharaj, he's like, oh, the horse is gone, what to do? He didn't notice that Indra took it. He just saw that it had disappeared. So he sent his sons to go find it. And now Sagar Maharaj had 60,000 sons. He had a lot of sons. and they were looking all over the place to find this horse. And then finally they found it just, wandering around, grazing there near the ashram of Kapila Muni. And then they made an assumption. So this is how, Brajabihari Prabhu says that assumptions, the word assume is like ASS, and then you, and then ME, me. So he said that when we make assumptions, then we make an ass out of you and me. So in other words, we often get ourselves into trouble by making assumptions. And that's what happened to these sons of Sagar, that they assumed that Kapila Dev was the thief, that he had stolen the horse. And so without asking any questions, they just picked up their weapons. They were all Kshatriya princes, so they went with weapons in hand, and they charged him, and they were intending to kill him, to punish him and get the horse. So Kapila Dev, he's an incarnation of the Lord. He's like a Shakti Vaishavatar incarnation, I think. So he was totally calm. He knew he wasn't at all afraid or even worried. And he was just sitting there totally fixed in peacefulness in the mode of goodness. And he didn't even, what to speak of being scared of them, he didn't wish them any kind of harm. He just, he didn't try to defend himself. But what happened is that their own misbehavior caused the fire in their bodies, because everyone has a little fire, like the fire of digestion. It caused the fire in their own bodies to increase and, increase intensely, to the point where they all just became self-emoluated. In other words, they just burnt up by the fire of their own anger towards this great personality. So that was the end of all 60,000 of them. And the only thing that was left was a big pile of ashes. And the horse was still there. And Kapila Muni just went back to his meditation. So then meanwhile, King Sagar, waiting for his sons to return, they didn't return for a long time. And he's thinking, how am I going to do this horse sacrifice? So he has a grandson. One of his sons had a son before they left and got killed. And this grandson grew up. And he thought, I need to find my uncles there somewhere. I need to figure out what happened to them, and, and also find the horse so that my grandfather can get his desire fulfilled. So he goes out looking, and he comes to this huge pile of ashes, and he understands, somehow he understands that this is what happened. And he sees the horse. The horse is still there and just grazing near the ashram of Kapila Dev, who is sitting in meditation outside. But this grandson, his name is Amsuman. So Amsuman was different from his brothers. So he recognized Kapila Dev to be a great saint. He understood that he was basically the Lord. And so he offered his obeisances, he offered prayers. And then Kapila Dev was so touched by this, young man's attitude of respect and veneration, that he just started speaking to him, speaking transcendental knowledge, like teaching him. And then after giving, a little class explaining transcendental knowledge to him, then he said, oh, I'm very pleased with you, your mood, your attitude in approaching me, and your attentive hearing of my discourse. And by the way, here's the horse that your grandfather lost. He just hands over the horse. He just says, please just take it. And then he says, these ashes here, like you may have guessed, are the remains of your forefathers. And if you want to deliver them from their, hellish destination, from trying to kill me, basically, then the only way to do that is with the waters of the holy Ganges, with the Ganga. No, there's no other means for their deliverance. So this was, of course, a big problem for Amsuman, because the Ganga wasn't even in the world yet. There was no Ganges River on the planet. So then Amsuman spent the rest of his life just performing austerities to try to cause the Ganga to come to this world. But despite all his efforts, he wasn't successful. And so he just died, and the Ganga didn't come. But he had a son, and his son took up, continued the austerities that his father was performing, and his son also died unsuccessful. But then finally, the grandson, so this grandson's name was Bhagirat, And Bhagirath was performing similar austerities. And finally, Ganga Devi appeared. So this is Bhagirath sitting there, and Ganga Devi was pleased with his sincerity of purpose, and she spoke to him. And she said, "Dear Bhagirath, I'm pleased with you, and I'm prepared to come to award you the benediction that you desire, but I have a couple of concerns." So her first concern was, who will sustain the force of my descent? Because Ganga is coming from way up. It's coming from, the top of the universe, basically, and it's going to fall down with such force that it's going to basically just pierce right through the earth and come out the other side, go into the earth and go all the way down to the lower regions, the subterranean planets, down to Pataloka. So she was afraid that was going to happen. And then the second concern she had is that all these sinful people are going to come bathe in my waters, and they're just going to basically drop their sins in me, and then I'm going to become contaminated with so many sins, and I'm not like enthused about that either. So she said that if you can solve these problems and present to me like viable, solutions, then I'll come. So then King Bhagirath said, well, don't worry about the contaminations, because so many pure devotees are also going to come and bathe in your water, and because their touch is as good as the touch of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then their bathing in your water will counteract all the sins, and you'll become purified. And then as far as breaking the impact of the water, then Bhagirath thought, well, I don't know who can do that except Lord Shiva, because Lord Shiva is so powerful. He drank a whole ocean of poison. He's like, in his own tattva, he's almost as powerful as the Lord. I think only Lord Shiva can sustain such a force. So then Bhagirath went and performed more austerities to please Lord Shiva. And then Lord Shiva appeared to him, and he asked him, please, the Ganga wants to come to the earth, but she needs somebody to basically break her fall so that the earth is not destroyed, so she doesn't end up down in places where she doesn't want to be. And can you please basically receive the Ganga? So Lord Shiva said, yes, I will accept the impact of the Ganga on my head. And so then Bhagirath told Ganga Devi that, okay, it's all sorted out. Lord Shiva is going to, he's almost non-different from, he's basically non-different from the Lord, like, yogurt and milk kind of thing. So he can sustain the whole universe on his head, what to speak of your waters. That's not going to be a problem. So then Ganga Devi said, okay, then I'll come. And then, so she comes down from beyond the universe. And the first thing, even before coming to the earth, she first comes on Lord Shiva's head. So there you can see this really dramatic picture of Ganga pouring down from the spiritual sky, basically, onto the head of Lord Shiva. And yeah, some people say that the Milky Way, that, sometimes on a clear night, you look into the sky, and especially if you're in the countryside. We used to see this all the time, actually, in Mayapur. Is you look up and you see this, all these swirls, just this like white swirl. It's not stars, it's like just like the Milky Way. It's a swirl, milky swirl up there. That people call that the Akash Ganga. And Akash means sky or ether. So it's kind of like, yeah, the ethereal form of the Ganga coming to this world, because the Ganga is still coming. It's not that it came and then stopped coming. It's continually coming because it's continually flowing. So whether it is or is not the Milky Way that we see in the sky, I can't tell you, but they do call it that. So it could be. I haven't seen a specific Shastric reference for that, so don't quote me, but that's what they say. Okay, so the Ganga comes to this earth, and then you can see here, this is really interesting. This is actually all described in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 5th canto, chapter 17, how the Ganga goes from the head of Lord Shiva, you can see here, and then enters within our universe. So this is coming into the universal shell. So Lord Shiva is outside the universe. He's in his own Loka. And then after that, it passes through Dhruva Loka, the pole star area. And Dhruva Maharaj, because he's a devotee, he takes the Ganges water on his head with devotion and he becomes ecstatic. So we're getting at this also, it's from Lord Shiva. So we're getting all the like Abhishek, it's like Abhishek from Lord Shiva. Then Dhruva Maharaj, who's a pure devotee. And then it flows to the planets of the, where is it? Can't find my cursor. Here it is. It flows to the planets of the 7 sages over here, which make up the planets here of the Big Dipper, the Saptarishi planets. And those sages also, they put the water on their heads. And then this is a pretty amazing description there in the Bhagavatam. It says that from the planets of the 7 sages, it's carried by billions of celestial airplanes to the moon. So all these airplanes are just loading up, like so many, they're just loading up with Ganga water and then transporting it to the moon and then, like dumping it onto the moon. And then from the moon, then it falls down onto the top of Mount Meru, which is here. This is Mount Meru, which is kind of like the pivot of these Bhumandala. Okay. And then Mount Meru, so you can see there that Mount Meru is an upside down mountain. It's got the peak on the bottom, and then the flat bottom part is actually up. So this is the top of Mount Meru. And it's got these palaces of the demigods in it, in all of the 4 directions, and then the 4 in between, or I think they call them cardinal directions. And the central palace is Lord Brahma's palace. So it lands there, and then it flows in the 4 directions down the mountain. So then this is another view of Mount Meru and the Ganga flowing down. So the southern branch is the one that flows down onto the Himalayas, and it emerges in a place called Gomukh, which is near Gangotri in India, in northern India, in the Himalayas. So you can see here the southern one is this one here. It's coming down and it's landing in the mountains there. And this is Gomukh. So this place, if you go to India, you have to go in the summertime because it's super cold. I've been to Gangotri. It's freezing cold up there. It's above the tree line. And there's a hike. It's a long walk. It's like all day walking. And there's no way to get there except by foot. You can walk to this place here. And it's like a cave. You can see it's a cave where the Ganga is emerging. And from there, the Ganga flows. So, okay, so as soon as the Ganga touched the earth, then King Bhagirath, who was waiting for it, it's described in the Bhagavatam that he's driving his chariot. The picture here doesn't show a chariot. Anyways, you can just imagine him in a chariot. So he's driving his chariot in front of the Ganga as it's flowing, and he's directing it to the spot where, his forefathers, the sons of Sagar, were burnt to ashes, because the whole point is he wants it to go there, flow over them, and then they're all going to be delivered. But then, so that's going all fine until they get to Navadvip Dham. And then something unexpected happens. So yeah, this is an interesting link to Navadvip Dham. And this is described in the Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, which is the book that we've been reading for most of these sessions so far. And so Lord Nityananda tells the story of how the Ganga flowed into Navadvip, and it was heading straight for the ashram of Janu Muni, who lives in Janudvip, which, remember, that was one of the 9 islands we talked about last time, the 9 islands of Navadvip. One of them is Janudvip. And Janu Muni had his ashram there. And he was right in the middle of chanting his Gayatri very peacefully when the Ganga just came rushing in and like swamping everything, flooding his whole ashram, the whole area, because the Ganga is very strong and powerful and wide. And Janu Muni was a very powerful sage. So he was so powerful that, he was a little annoyed by being disturbed in the middle of chanting his Gayatri. So, remember this, don't disturb a Brahmin when they're chanting their Gayatri. And Janu Muni just opened up his mouth and swallowed the whole Ganga. Don't ask me how he did that, but he was special personality. So then King Bhagirat, he turns around because he's like driving his chariot forward, thinking the Ganga's following them. He turns around and he's like, hey, where did the Ganga go? And then he saw Janamuni there, you know, and he understood that Janamuni had swallowed the Ganga. So then Bhagirat, you know, he took so much trouble, all those austerities, not just him, but all of his forefathers performing all those austerities to get the Ganga to come for the sake of, you know, delivering his great, you know, grandfathers. And so he wasn't happy, but he had learned from the mistake of the sons of Sagar that whatever you do, don't treat a saintly person harshly. So this is obviously a powerful saintly person, and I need to deal with him very humbly and respectfully. So Bhagirat, he humbly approached Janamuni and he worshipped him and basically stayed there in his ashram for several days, just serving him, just doing menial services, until Janamuni was like so satisfied with him and pleased with him that he said, oh, you know, I'm very happy with your service. Is there something that I can do for you? And Bhagirat said, yeah, please, that all that water that you swallowed, can you please release it and let it flow? So some people say that the Ganga came out of Janamuni's ear, and some say that it came out of his knee, that he like cut open his knee and it came out of his leg. I'm not sure which is the correct version, but somehow or other, the Ganga came flowing out of the body of Janamuni in some uncommon way. And for that reason, because the Ganga came from Janamuni, it's called Janavi, which means like the daughter of Janu. So another name for Ganga is Janavi. So then the Ganga kept flowing now to the place where the sons of Sagar had been burnt up. And as soon as the Ganges water touched that pile of ashes, then the souls of those sons of Sagar immediately ascended into heaven. So that's another reason why when you know, someone leaves their body and they get cremated, then devotees will often take the ashes to the Ganga, to sprinkle the ashes on the Ganga, because that will mean that the departed soul will be liberated from material bondage. And then we see that like these sons of Sagar, they were like, you know, they were pretty like heavy people, that they just went and attacked Kapila Muni. So Shukadeva Goswami says in the Srimad Bhagavatam in that section that this shows that if even offensive and violent people come in contact with the Ganga, then even they can go to heaven. And he says, what to speak of those who actually worship the Ganga with devotion? And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that anyone who regularly worships Mother Ganga by bathing in her water keeps very good health and becomes a devotee of the Lord. So then this map shows the route of the Ganga through India. So it comes from way up here in the Himalayas and it flows down, passes through Allahabad, which is where they have the Kumbh Mela, and Varanasi, which is, you hear about Varanasi in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Patna, and then Faraka is a place where they have this big dam. I'm going to show a picture of it later, but there they dam up the Ganga, and then it splits into two parts. One part goes to Bangladesh, the bigger part, and the smaller part, after that point, they call it the Hooghly. It's still the Ganga, but they just give it another name. So it passes, this Hooghly branch is the one that passes through Navadvip, and then it goes through Kolkata, and then it flows into the Bay of Bengal. Whereas the other one goes through Bangladesh. You see it passes over here close to Dhaka, which is the capital of Bangladesh, and then it combines with this Meghna and then flows. So the Bay of Bengal, this Ganga Sagar Delta, is the biggest delta in the world. There's so many branches of the Ganga. It splits up a lot there. But you see how all these other holy rivers on the map, see the Yamuna also flows into the Ganga. Gomati flows into the Ganga. Gandaki, the Kali Gandaki River from Nepal, the one where all the Shaligram Shilas are found, that also flows into the Ganga. So this is shown here. This is an interesting chart here. the relevant section is the bottom part. So you see all these rivers, they're on their own, the Yamuna, Chambal, Betwa, Ganga, Gomati, etc. And then as they go, the smaller ones become tributaries, which merge into the bigger ones. And you see how what's happening is they're all merging into the Ganga, and the Ganga is just getting bigger, and these other rivers are disappearing. And then the only one that, yeah, so basically towards the end, pretty much everything has merged into the Ganga. So then when we, by the time we get to Navadvip, because Navadvip is towards the end, you see it's really near to the Bay of Bengal. So when we bathe in the Ganga at Navadvip, we're not just bathing in the Ganga, but we're bathing in the Yamuna, the Gomati, the Gandaki, the, all these rivers. The only one that doesn't merge into the Ganga in Navadvip is Brahmaputra. That merges later on the other side. Hooghly. Yeah, the Ganga that we bathe in is actually the Hooghly, the ones at top here. So the Brahmaputra doesn't mix with that in Navadvip, but it later. So then someone might think, well, gosh, so many rivers are flowing into the Ganga, and we're basically at the bottom end of the Ganga after it's passed through all these cities, and some of them are like major cities. And so isn't the Ganga like really polluted? And, you can read that, people will say that the Ganga is like, one of the top 10 polluted rivers in the planet. So is it safe to bathe in the Ganga? That's like a question that you could ask. Are we going to like get diseases and things? So Rupa Goswami addresses this in the Nectar of Instruction, text 6, where he says, Gangamba samna kalu buddha fena pankar Brahma dravatvam apagachati niradharmai. He says that this verse is in reference to the body of pure devotees, that sometimes a pure devotee may have, they may have a disease, they may have some, terrible rash, or they may have a deformity. So does that make them impure? Does that mean that they're having karmic reactions or they have some contamination? Rupa Goswami is saying, no, it's exactly like the waters of the Ganges, which sometimes during the rainy season are full of bubbles, foam, and mud, but the Ganges waters do not become polluted. And those who are advanced in spiritual understanding, they'll bathe in the Ganges without considering the condition of the water. So the word here is Brahma Dravatvam. That means it's totally spiritual. Brahma, it's just, Brahma here means spiritual. So a spiritual thing, something that's totally spiritual, can't be contaminated by material things. That material pollutants might be in it, but the Ganga has this amazing quality actually of being self-purifying. And this has even been scientifically proven. So when we get to Mayapur, if you go to some devotees' houses, you'll see that outside the door, they have these big like buckets, like covered buckets. And what they do is they go to the Ganga and they collect water, and then they just keep it. They don't even go to the middle of the Ganga or deep in they just right from the, just right from the edge, they take this like muddy, whatever, Ganga water, and they put it in the buckets and they leave it for 10 days to sit outside their front doors. And then, and then they just, after 10 days, they just drink it. they don't even filter it. They don't boil it. They just kind of like pour it out. All the sediment goes to the bottom. They just kind of decant off the top part of the, the water into a jug, and they just drink it. And so, and they don't get sick. And the water's like really nice. It's like really like when you drink it, you're like, wow, that's good quality water. And then they took some samples. So one of the devotees wanted to test it. So they knew somebody who worked in a lab, like a water testing, water quality laboratory. So they took a sample from the Ganga that they just took, just collected sample. And then they took a sample after sitting in that bucket for 10 days. And the person did a chemical analysis on it, and very professionally. And they determined that whereas 10 days, the fresh sample was full of contaminants, that after 10 days, all those contaminants were somehow absent. And it was actually good quality, potable drinking water. So that just shows the spiritual, transcendental, self-purifying nature of the Ganga water. And yeah, I know people, I've drunk that water myself. All right, so we're going to see some pictures here of the Ganga at different stages of its descent through on this planet. So this is in Gangotri, very near to the source at Gomukh. It's quite narrow, but it's flowing fast because it's coming down from the mountains. And then this is in Rishikesh. It's still in the mountains, and it's getting wider. Then this is Allahabad, where they have the Kumbh Mela. This is Kumbh Mela time, so there's all those people there, and they're all bathing in the Ganga, the special day. You can see it's more flat there. The Ganga is very wide. Then here's Varanasi. It's a famous city. This is where Lord Chaitanya went and converted the Mayavadis to become Vaishnavas. And it's really built up on the Ganga like that. It's a very picturesque city. And then this is just some farmland. So the Ganga continues flowing through all kinds of like cities and farmland. And it's provides irrigation for a lot of the agriculture in India, in northern India. And then this is the dam that I was talking about. So this is very close actually to Navadvip. It's not far. I went here with my family. We went to see it. It's amazing. You see how wide the Ganga is here? You can't even see the other side of it. Even there, when you're there in person, it's like standing on the edge of like Lake Ontario or something. You know, it looks like the ocean. You know, it's not that big. It's not like the Atlantic Ocean, but you know, according to our mundane vision, you wouldn't know that because you can't see the other side. It's so wide. But then at this dam, this is where it gets split. So most of it goes to Bangladesh. And that's why Bangladesh has these huge floods during the rainy season often. And then it's actually a very small part of it that continues in India and flows into West Bengal and goes into Navadvip. So when we get to Mayapur, you can't see you'll see in a minute, but this is Mayapur, TOVP, and then you see there on the right is the dome of Prabhupada's Samadhi. So the Ganga there is not so wide. You could, if you're a strong swimmer, I wouldn't advise it, but you'll end up going a lot downstream, but people do sometimes swim across it. I've never swum across it. And then here's a really beautiful picture. This is, I should get rid of this, but you can see how like there's the TOVP in the background there. And then this is the Ganga. The Ganga is always this, remember I was saying that it has a pink, you can actually see here, it looks kind of pinkish. But usually to my vision, the Ganga always looks silvery. It's kind of like a silvery gray. And here's the Jalangi, which is black. This is black. I always think it's so interesting that the Ganga and the Jalangi are and they're always a different color. They're always like this. One is brown, one is black, or silvery, and one is like very dark. So this is where they merge. And we'll, when we go to Navadvip from Mayapur, we'll probably go from this ghat here, or now there's a new ghat down here. So it might be from here or here. We'll get a boat and we'll start in the Jalangi and we'll go right through this. We're going to pass right through this and then continue down the Ganga off, to Navadvip town. So that you'll have the experience of seeing this confluence and like being right there, basically in the confluence. So, we're going to, oh no, maybe we'll be okay. I'm worried about the time because we're supposed to end and I still want to say a few more things. Anyways, bear with me. So, yeah, so the Ganga was a huge part of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes in this world. And actually previously, when Krishna was performing his Vrindavan Leela, Ganga Devi was seeing all that and she was thinking, the Yamuna is so fortunate. Yamuna Devi is doing such wonderful service for Krishna because, Krishna and his friends they're taking the cows down to drink the water. They're playing there. They're doing all kinds of water sports in the Yamuna. And Krishna and the gopis also, after the rasa dance, they go bathe in the Yamuna and they're hiding behind the lotus flowers and they're playing. And, Krishna wanders. He's Yamuna Bihari. He wanders along the banks of the Yamuna. So it's not that the Ganga was envious or jealous or anything like that, but she was just so happy to see the good fortune of the Yamuna. And she was also longing to be able to serve the Lord in such intimate ways as the Yamuna was. So actually Ganga Devi went and did her own austerities. We were hearing about how others were doing austerities to bring the Ganga. So Ganga was also doing her own austerities because she actually wanted to come. And Krishna gave her the blessing that yes, in Kali Yuga, Radha and Krishna will appear again as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in that form, Radha and Krishna will perform pastimes in Navadvip. And you will be there to assist in every way in those pastimes. And indeed, the Ganga does assist in practically every way in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. That even before he came, there was a lunar eclipse, and all the people of Navadvip went to the Ganga, and they were standing there chanting the holy names in the Ganga, as was the custom. So everybody's just in the Ganga, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And that was the time when Lord Chaitanya appeared. And then later this middle picture showing how Nimai, when he was a little boy, he would play in the Ganga a lot with his friends. Every day, practically after school, they would go straight to the Ganga and just jump in and have a lot of fun splashing and swimming and disturbing the Brahmins. We'll talk about that when we get to Lord Chaitanya's childhood pastimes. And then later, when he was a little more grown up and he was Nimai Pandit, then he met this scholar named Keshava Kashmiri. That's the picture on the right. And so when he meets Keshava Kashmiri, then he challenges him to, recite something. And he tells him, recite something about the Ganga, compose verses in glorification of Mother Ganga. And so Keshava Kashmiri, he instantly composes 100 verses glorifying the Ganga. And then they have this really nice exchange where Lord Chaitanya, he basically shows Keshava Kashmiri that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead and makes him a devotee. And all that happened on the bank of the Ganga. And then later, Lord Chaitanya, after he took initiation and he started the Sankirtan movement in full force, that happened on the bank of the Ganga. And he also took sannyas on the bank of the Ganga. He went and first bathed in the Ganga, then took sannyas right there on the bank of the Ganga. And then afterwards, he went to Jagannath Puri. And Vrindavan Das Thakur talks about, in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, he talks about how Mother Ganga was so eager to continue assisting Lord Chaitanya in his pastimes, because while he was in Navadvip, he was bathing in the Ganga 3 times a day. And she was thinking, oh no, he's going to Puri. I'm going to be feeling so much separation. I have to be there also because I want him to bathe in me, continue bathing in me 3 times a day. So Vrindavan Das Thakur says that the Ganga started flowing faster and she was flowing into the Bay of Bengal. And then by the ocean path, she was flowing down from Ganga Sagar to Puri, because Puri is right on the beach. And Lord Chaitanya when Lord Chaitanya would bathe in the ocean, he was also bathing in that ocean mixed with Ganga water. So Ganga was happy to be able to continue to have the Lord bathe in her 3 times a day. And then later, when Lord Chaitanya went back, a couple times that he went back to visit Bengal, then he made some really powerful statements. He said that in this age of Kali, I come in 2 forms, as wood and as water. He says, as wood, I am Lord Jagannath, and as water, I am Mother Ganga. And both of these have come to deliver the fallen souls of this age from their sins and give love for Krishna. And he also said, while he was walking to Bengal, he said to his associates, he said, I'm going to Bengal for two reasons. To see my mother, Sachi Mata, and to see my other mother, the Ganga Mai, Mother Ganga. So Lord Chaitanya had this really intimate relationship with the Ganga. And he also said that he started glorifying the Ganga while he was walking there. He said that anyone who bathes in the Ganga, touches the Ganga, drinks Ganga, sees Ganga, or anyone who is touched even by a breeze that has come from the Ganga will get Krishna prema, or love for Krishna. So the breeze of the Ganga can awaken love of God within us, but we have to, if we have the receptivity. So there's also a mood that we'll talk about in tomorrow's class. We're going to talk about the mood of entering the Dham and being able to receive all these blessings very powerfully. Narottam Das Thakur has a song in which he says that by bathing, so this is just to give you a hint of the mood, that by bathing hundreds of times in the Ganga, one can be purified of sins and have love of God awakened within us. But just by seeing a pure Vaishnava one time, just by seeing the Vaishnava, the same effect is achieved because the devotees of the Lord are holy places personified. So the point here is that the real purpose of going on pilgrimage is to associate with the sadhus, with the Vaishnavas who live in those places, because the Ganga of Krishna Katha that flows from their mouths and the Ganga of the blessings that come naturally from their compassionate hearts is really the most valuable, the most priceless blessing of all blessings. And that by that blessing, then we're able to access the mercy of the Ganga. So, yeah, so it's important to have this proper state of mind. Okay, I'm sorry I went a little bit over time today, but there was a lot here to cover. Are there any questions or comments on this that I can answer quickly? Govinda.
I just had a quick comment. In Journey Home, Radhanath Swami, he was sitting under the rocks and he heard the Maha Mantra.
Yeah, so he got the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra from the Ganga, which shows that Ganga is a transcendental personality that can even speak to us and, you know, act like a guru for us. Nice. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. I hope you enjoyed the stories about the Ganga, and hope to see you all tomorrow. Ganga Devi ki jai, Shri Navadvip Dham ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo.